Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will call the Board of Examiners meeting to order. All members are present. Mr. Attorney General, can you hear us loud and clear in Las Vegas?
Yes, Governor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which is public comment. Is there any member of the public present in Carson City that would like to provide public comment to the board? I hear and see none. Is there anyone present in Las Vegas that would like to provide public comment to the board?
No one coming, Governor.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move to agenda item number 3, which is the approval of the January 9, 2018 meeting minutes. Have the members had an opportunity to review the minutes, and are there any changes? If not, the chair will accept a motion for approval.
Move for approval, Governor.
Secretary of State has moved for approval. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I hear none. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move to agenda item number 4, which is a request to purchase state vehicles. Good morning, Mr. Wells.
Good morning, Governor, members of the board. There are 3 requests for 4 vehicles in this agenda item this morning. The first and second requests are from the Department of Agriculture to purchase 1 replacement vehicle for the Commodity Food Program and 2 replacement vehicles for the Consumer Equitability Program that have met the age and or mileage requirements in the State Administrative Manual. The third request is from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Environmental Protection Division to purchase 1 replacement vehicle for the Bureau of Corrective Actions that has met the age and or mileage requirements in SAM. All of these vehicles were included in the agency's legislatively approved budgets, and there are representatives available to answer any questions the board members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I have no questions. Pretty straightforward. Board members, any questions? If there are none, the chair will accept a motion for approval.
Move for approval.
Secretary of State has moved to approve the request to purchase state vehicles as presented in agenda item number 4. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I hear none. All in favor say aye.
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 That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is authorization to contract with a current and or former state employee. Mr. Wells, please proceed.
Thank you, Governor. Item 5 includes three requests from the Department of Transportation to contract with former employees pursuant to NRS 333.705 subsection 1. The 3 requests are to allow a contracted vendor, Diversified Consulting Services, to use former employees on projects that have been awarded to that vendor. The first and second requests are for Inspector Level 4 positions to augment construction crews in District 3. The first employee retired in March of 2017 and the second retired in January of 2017. The third request is for a senior inspector to augment construction crews for Project Neon, and this employee retired in January of 2018. The former employees did not have any influence or authority over the contracts with the vendor, and there are representatives from the Department of Transportation available to answer any questions for the members.
All right, thank you. I do have one question. Mr. Kaiser, if you could come forward, please. I get to see you 2 days in a row. It's an inside joke. We had a Board of Transportation meeting yesterday as well. But so, Mr. Kaiser, the third one is that's my only question that I wanted to make a record on, is the proximity from the retirement to going on to the vendor. Do you have any comment in that regard?
There we go. Okay. The reason the consultant hired this person is this individual will help with this next stage when they start in March to help the consultant with the inspection services. So he won't be doing anything other than helping out with, I think, the night work when the consultant is out there inspecting the contractor's operations.
And this is exclusive to Project Neon?
Exclusive to Project Neon, yes.
Questions from other board members? Thank you.
Yep.
If there are no further questions, the chair will accept a motion to approve the authorizations to contract with the current and or former state employees presented in agenda item number 5.
Move to approve.
Attorney General has moved for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by the Secretary of State. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I hear none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, which are approval of proposed contracts. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There are 34 contracts in Agenda Item 6 for approval by the board this morning. Members have requested additional information on the following. Contract number 2 between the Office of the Attorney General and Egan Fitzpatrick, Malsh, and Lawrence. Contract number 7 between the Public Works Division and Core Construction Services of Nevada. Contract number 14 between Public Works Division and Gallagher and Associates. And contract number 23 between the Department of Health and Human Services Division of Child and Family Services and the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Let's have contract number 2 first. I had asked for this, and it's particularly timely given the budget and its inclusion of, I believe, $150 million for Yucca Mountain. So particularly curious as to where we are and where we're going. Please proceed.
Good morning, Governor and Secretary of State and Attorney General. For the record, I'm Robert Halstead, Executive Director, Agency for Nuclear Projects. I thought that someone from the AG's office, I think, will be accompanying us in a moment. I guess the opening thing I'd say is, yes, if yesterday's budget release were a bad movie, the title would be, "We're Back Again." And the budget request is actually larger this year than it was last year. It's $120 million for the Department of Energy and now $48 million for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The situation with Yucca Mountain has not changed. The site is unsafe. The Department of Energy's repository engineering plan doesn't make it safe, and the transportation plan is unacceptable and unsafe. And we're continuing primarily to oppose the Yucca Mountain project through the licensing proceeding before the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That's why this contract is so important. You know, in our business, we apply percentages to everything, and about 70% of our resources and our fight are focused on the licensing proceeding. About 15% is focused on litigation. I think Nick is going to talk about some of the people in the AG's office that are helping with that. And then we are also working with our congressional delegation on legislative issues in Washington, particularly on the appropriations to oppose them, opposing the Shimkus bill that would be, in my opinion, screw Nevada too. And then we are working on some positive legislation to implement the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Commission to extend consent to Nevada. So that's what the situation is, and we're happy to answer any questions about the contract. I think Nick would like to say a couple things about the AG's team.
Good morning, Governor Sandoval, Secretary of State Sagaski, and Attorney General Laxalt. Nick Trutanich on behalf of the Attorney General's office. First and foremost, I wanted to stress that the Attorney General's office continues to be committed to a fight against a nuclear repository at Yucca Mountain. The AG's office has made its internal team more robust than ever before, including adding resources from our Solicitor General's office. Before describing the contract in more detail and answering questions that this committee might have, I wanted to personally compliment the internal team of lawyers that are committed to this fight, including Belinda Suey, Wayne Howell, and Jordan Smith. I also wanted to say that although this is technically a new contract with Egan Fitzpatrick, it's essentially a continuation of a contractual relationship with our special counsel, our outside counsel, that we've had since 2001. It stems from an appropriation to our office by the 2017 legislature. The AG's office was appropriated $3.4 million for outside counsel, and the Agency for Nuclear Projects was appropriated approximately $1.7 million. And so this three-party contract basically memorializes and it gives us authority to spend those appropriations. And with that, I'd take any questions along with Mr. Hallstead.
All right. Thank you. And with regard to the budget, that was something I put in the budget in 2017. So I do appreciate the legislature agreeing and in doing that. I guess what I would add, Mr. Halstead, is that I'll use the Yogi Berraism, which it's deja vu all over again. This is a conversation that I've engaged in and an activity that I've engaged in since my time in the legislature in the 90s. Since my time as the Attorney General. Marta Adams is here, and somebody that has spent essentially a career fighting Yucca Mountain, and we're blessed to have her assistance as well. I still recall in 2003 appearing before the DC Court of Appeals on this issue. So, I agree with you, Mr. Chutanich, in terms of that we have to maintain the vigor, the ferocity, and the tenacity with regard to fighting any effort to store high-level nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain. So I appreciate the Attorney General's efforts and commitment to do that. I guess this leads to my first question, Mr. Halstead, is that this is essentially the same amount that was put in the budget 2 years ago, yet we didn't see any activity. So or much activity, I guess I shouldn't say any, but we didn't see much activity or the expenditure of those funds, or perhaps we did, but we really didn't see anything move out at the site. And so why don't you catch us up on what they got for their $150 million 2 years ago and what you see, where you see this money going now?
Well, first of all, they haven't gotten any new money. Certainly, I credit our congressional delegation and our 2 U.S. senators with opposing the request, but also the request is one that at a time when budget numbers count, the Congressional Budget Office score that just starting up Yucca Mountain is $4 to $5 billion over the next 10 years, I think is causing the appropriators in both houses of Congress to think hard about whether they want to throw another $82 billion into this project. I think actually it will be much more expensive, but that's the DOE number. So the Department of Energy has been operating on carryover funds. They have between $10 and $20 million. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission started out a couple years ago with about $10 million, and they've spent their money down. This is in carrying out the 2013 writ of mandamus issued by the DC Circuit to force a restart. And we had a peculiar situation where the Nuclear Regulatory Commission did quite a bit of work in December, and we're getting ready to have a meeting with them at the end of February about the licensing support network. And the monthly bill came in at $9,999, which is a remarkably efficient use of resources, and tells us the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is trying to push this forward almost on their own. You did meet with Secretary Perry, and after your meeting last March, we had a meeting, and you gave us our marching orders again, and we have been redoubling our efforts in addition to the licensing proceeding, looking at, in particular, 2 of the lawsuits, one in the Ninth Circuit and one in the DC Circuit, plus we've intervened in the Texas case in the Fifth Circuit. And we've been doing a lot of legislative analysis in support of our delegation. But the Department of Energy has not revealed what they have been doing. And in fact, our 2 senators are getting ready to send a letter to the Department of Energy saying, well, how much money did you spend in fiscal year 2017 of your carryover money, and what are you doing now? They're simply not saying anything in public about what they're doing.
Okay. As I said, I don't want to be redundant, but if anybody's listening, we're not giving up, and we're going to continue to fight, and we're going to put the resources forward to maintain the ability to continue to fight on a face-to-face basis and meet every type of effort to try and license this facility with equal measure. So I'm as committed today as I was 20 years ago, 23 years ago, and I know that our Attorney General is as well, and I'm not going to speak for him. I'm sure he has a couple comments that he wants to make, but I appreciate your efforts and you also spending essentially a career on this, and that's a depth of devotion that you don't see too often, and it's on behalf of the people of this great state. And it is to stop defective project that we know shouldn't proceed, and frankly is an immense waste of taxpayer money. And so we're going to keep fighting. We fight, and I've said it before, and I will say it again. Last comment, I know I said, maybe I'll say this is last comment. I see that you brought a Time magazine with you, Mr. Halstead, and I'm aware of the contents of that story. It is an unsourced story. I've had conversations with the administration regarding that, but if you want to make any comments on that, feel free to do so.
I'll just make a couple, Governor, and thank you for the opportunity. This Time magazine is something of a collector's item now. I personally feel that while I understand the journalism business, the article discusses the possible resumption of underground testing. So, of course, to sell magazines, the cover shows a 1952 atmospheric test, and most Nevadans understand that that was a time that put unacceptable impacts on southern Nevada and Utah especially, in the downwinder areas. So the actual information in the article simply reports what most of us have been hearing for the last 10 months or so, that there is a policy review, a consideration of whether new nuclear weapons development should proceed. If it proceeds, is testing necessary? And then the old question that for 25 years we've answered no, is that testing is not necessary to verify the capability of the existing nuclear arsenal. And that's a job that the National Nuclear Security Administration people that operate at the Nevada National Security Site carry out with great integrity and great technical expertise. I had the opportunity to talk with some of them last week, in fact. So what the article reports that was of great concern was a sentence that said that this testing might be resumed, quote unquote, for political purposes. To our knowledge, no resumption of testing has been ordered. I've done a close review of the nuclear posture review that came out the day after the article, and it certainly does show some changes. It begins with an opening statement on this topic that past assumptions have proven mistaken about the need for testing and so forth. But in the end, what the nuclear posture review says, I guess I quote from it: "The United States will not seek Senate ratification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, but will continue to observe a nuclear test moratorium that began in 1992. I think we're going to have to look very carefully at the Bipartisan Budget Act that passed last week, because there are some defense spending provisions. We're certainly going to look closely at the Department of Defense and DOE budget requests that really have not been released in detail. The summaries were released yesterday. So I'd like to assure you that we continue to monitor this, and along with the Yucca Mountain work that we have to be looking at, the agency and the AG's office, we have a lot of work to do.
Well, let me just follow up that, Mr. Halstead, because I want to make sure the record is clear. There is no light. I mean, there is, I've been assured that there is no chance that there'll be any commencement or recommencement of testing of nuclear weapons out there at the test site. And that was a story that I woke up to and was immediately on the phone. And again, and having several conversations with individuals in Washington, and I have received absolute 100% confirmation that there will be no testing of that kind. So I want to make sure that's clear on the record for everybody to understand, although that article may imply otherwise. All right, questions from other members? Madam Secretary of State.
Thank you, Governor, and I do want to thank you and the AG's office for your fight over the years. In the late 90s, there were several legislators that we went around and talked to different groups about some of the issues for Nevada. So it's a topic that I've followed closely, and I just want to thank you for your service and what you're doing. As I travel around the state, I've met and talked to a lot of downwinders and their families, and have been really surprised over the years how far that reached and how far it went. So it is something that Nevadans are still talking about. It's still a big issue, and I just wanted to thank all of you for what you're doing, and I'm very supportive. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Attorney General, do you have any comments?
Yes, Governor, thank you. First, I do want to thank you for your leadership on this issue, especially pushing for this to make sure it's in the budget and prioritize, and thank the legislature for providing this funding today. As Mr. Trutanich mentioned, we've made a few adjustments internally in our office to buttress the team from the Attorney General's perspective. And I think working with Bob and the Agency of Nuclear Projects, as well as your office and Egan Fitzpatrick, that we have the best legal and technical team this state could ask for right now. And I certainly submit, as you do, that we are ready for this fight. And if this process continues, we will be prepared to litigate this as long and as hard as we need to make sure that this does not get restarted in the state of Nevada. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Mr. Trutanich, Mr. Halstead, any concluding remarks?
No, just a thank you to you, and it is also important for us to always thank the legislature for providing the resources that they provided, and also for their passage of Assembly Joint Resolution 10, which was a very strong statement, a bipartisan statement of the legislature's opposition to the Yucca Mountain project as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Trutanich.
Governor, I just wanted to thank you for your leadership on this issue, and thank Bob and his agency for being a great partner in this fight. Thank you.
We're all in this together. Thank you. We'll move to a little bit lighter subject on contract number 7, please.
Good morning, Governor and members of the board. My name is Chris Shimitz. I'm the interim administrator for the State Public Works Division. And this contract, if I may, just give a little context around it before we get to the contract. UNR approached Public Works to get the design started for the UNR engineering project under an agency agreement. It was a $3 million agency agreement that we did. And in that process, Public Works hired an architectural firm and a construction manager at risk. And we got through schematic design, design development, and 25% of the way through construction documents under that agency agreement. And so this contract that's before you today picks up where that effort left off. We've expended those funds and we've completed that work, and now we're just carrying forward into the CIP project. 17C06 with this contract, keeping the same architectural firm, the same construction management firm, but simply picking up the effort with the CIP project to complete the construction documents and get bidding completed and a GMP with this CMAR contract. So that's the purpose of this contract, is to just pick up where the agency project left off and get us to a GMP.
No, and I appreciate that update. I suppose I asked for this to come forward because it's an important project for the University of Nevada, Reno. And what is the schedule? Perhaps I'd asked this before in terms of construction and completion.
Sure. Chris Schmitz for the record. We've got the design developments coming in just a week or so from now for final review. The construction documents will be due in April, middle part of April. Then we plan on bidding this project in June, the end of June, and then we'll start construction right after the 4th of July on that project. The substantial completion, if we don't have any problems at all with that project, will be complete the end of July 2020.
It takes 2 years to build.
Yes, sir. It's a lot of building.
And then what was the total cost of the project?
The construction right now is at $76.5 million.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I have no further questions. Other questions from board members? All right, thank you. It's actually sooner than I thought, so
Yeah.
that's good. That's all I have. Thank you. We'll move, perhaps you have this as well, number 14.
I do. Chris Schmitz, for the record. This is a $247,000 contract with Gallagher and Associates. They're an exhibit designer out of the Bay Area. And they're here to complete the design for all of the exhibits that'll be used in the Cultural Center, building number 1 at Stewart. That project there, the schedule on that is that we're also planning on bidding that this summer, middle of June 2018, and anticipate a completion date of around March of 2019. And that's paralleling an effort that we're doing with an architectural firm here in town for the remodeling of the building as well. So they'll dovetail together at that point. When the construction's complete, then the exhibits will be installed.
So hopefully in a year, we'll have a museum at Stewart Indian School.
A year and a month.
A year and a month. I love how precise you are, yes. But I'm really excited about that project. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why I asked this to come forward, because it's obviously very important to Stewart. It's obviously very important to our Native American community. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's move to number 23, DHHS, Juvenile Justice, and the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. Ms. Woolridge, good morning.
Good morning. Kelly Woldridge, for the record, Administrator for the Division of Child and Family Services, and I'm happy to present this contract this morning. This contract is pursuant to AB 472, which was our juvenile justice reform bill. It's awarded to the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. This contract is to develop and implement an evidence-based resource center for services to juvenile justice professionals and stakeholders. The contract will be implemented in 4 phases. And hopefully the resource center will be up and running within the next year. The other thing that this contract will do for us is make sure that the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission's 5-year strategic plan includes performance-based standards that will just continue to improve outcomes for our kids and families.
Thank you, Ms. Woolridge. And just to go a little deeper, I mean, I think I remember the number off the top of my head that we spend $90+ million a year in state money on these types of services, yet we're not sure which ones work and which ones don't.
Kelly Woldridge, again, for the record, you're correct. It was in 2015, we found we spent almost $95 million across the state. However, we didn't have anything showing us that we had really any outcomes, good or negative outcomes. So this will definitely enhance those services.
And this contract is already underway, isn't it?
Kelly Woldridge, again, for the record. They haven't started, the National Council hasn't started work on the contract yet, but it certainly, the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission has already started with what we will need to do to completely implement this.
Yeah. And I guess this is more of a comment than a question, but this is a really important contract because it's not just about, I think you said it, Ms. Woolridge, it's about outcomes. And we have thousands of young men and women who are in our system, yet we don't know if the services that we're providing are working. And so in the future, this really could change the dynamic in young men and women's lives forever. And so I appreciate your hard work on this, because this is one of those under the radar type projects that really could be transformative for justice in our state. So thank you very much for your efforts. Any other questions or comments from board members on this contract?
Yes, Governor, I have a question. So when I pulled this initially, I was hoping for a little information on how the resource center will be constructed and what will go into it. I think now I understand that this is really the precursor to that, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly. This is meant to go out and kind of figure out how we're going to build this. Is that correct?
Kelly Woldridge for the record. Yes, that is correct. This contract will implement an evidence-based resource center in 4 phases, and actually the final phase is sustainability, so we will have to find a way to sustain this contract, but the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges will also be providing technical assistance and training about evidence-based services to our juvenile justice employees and stakeholders across the state.
Okay, then I'll have to follow up on that. So this contract will actually lay out the entire program? I guess what I'm getting at is that I'd like to know what this resource center is going to actually look like, and what will go into it. Is it too early for you to be able to describe that?
Kelly Woldridge again for the record. So the resource center will, the first thing that they'll do is they're going to do there's 4 phases, and the first is to assess and plan. So they'll assess what evidence-based services juvenile justice programs are using across the state right now. Then they'll develop a work plan and a staffing plan. Then the second phase is to prepare. So they will start preparing what evidence-based services we need to bring into Nevada for kids and families. And then they'll also, under the prepare phases, they'll assist the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission with our 5-year strategic plan. And then the third phase is learn, where it'll be web-based and classroom trainings across the state with juvenile justice stakeholders and employees about what evidence-based services are, how to use evidence-based services, and then choosing what evidence-based services we want for our kids and families in Nevada. And then the last phase will be sustain, where they will actually be assisting us in finding funding to sustain the evidence-based resource center. I hope that answered it.
It's not quite answering my questions.
Sorry.
Are you at a stage now where you can describe in greater detail where this resource center will be placed and what it actually looks like, and how it will function?
I'm Kelly Woldridge again for the record. I actually am not sure where it will be placed. I'm assuming it'll be placed in Reno at the National Council. It'll function, we're thinking similar to, I don't know if you're familiar with CASAT, but it's the Substance Abuse Evidence-Based Resource Center that's used, that's also at UNR. But I'm not at a stage where I can be really precise about exactly what it'll look like yet.
Okay, well, I am going to support this contract, but I would love if someone could follow back up with me when either someone else that has the greater details, or if we're just not there yet, when we do have some greater details. I would like to know how this is actually going to be stood up and how it'll perform for the state.
Kelly Woldridge for the record, and I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps it'd be helpful, Ms. Woolridge, this contract didn't just come out of HHS. It is the result of a very thoughtful process from the Juvenile Justice Commission, which is comprised of juvenile judges, the head of juvenile services in Clark County and Washoe County, one of the rural counties, and then the other experts that are on the Chief Justice, or former Justice Seda sits on this committee as well.
And Kelly Woolridge again for the record, and there are evidence-based resource centers across the country that can model for us how to do this, so I'm happy to send that information as well.
Thank you.
I believe that's all we had. Is that true, Mr. Wells? And board members, any other contracts you wanted to consider? All right, if there are no further questions, the chair will accept a motion to approve contracts 1 through 34 as presented in agenda item number 6.
Move for approval.
Secretary of State has moved for approval. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I hear none. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 7, which are master service agreements. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There is one master service agreement in agenda item 7 for approval by the board this morning, and no additional information was requested by any of the members.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I have no questions. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Secretary of State has moved for approval. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or discussion on the motion? There are none. All in favor say aye.
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 That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, information item. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There were 48 contracts under the $50,000 threshold approved by the clerk between December 19th of 2017 and January 22nd of 2018. This item is informational only, and no additional information was requested from any of the members.
Any questions from board members on agenda item number 8? Hear none. We'll move on to agenda item number 9, information item by DMV. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Agenda item 9 is an information report from the Department of Motor Vehicles on the voluntary contributions collected by county pursuant to NRS 482.480, the Complete Streets Program. This report is for the period of October 1st, 2017 through December 31st of 2017. The report is pretty self-explanatory. Contributions are roughly flat, going up about 3% year over year, and vary from quarter to quarter based on registration activity.
Okay. Any questions, board members, with regard to agenda item number 9? There are none. We'll move to agenda item number 10, public comment. Is there any member of the public present in Carson City that would like to provide a comment? There are none. Madam Secretary, did you have a comment?
Yes, if I could, Governor, I'd like to put on the agenda for our next meeting the update of the Grant Sawyer building by Public Works. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any public comment from Las Vegas?
See none, Governor.
Yeah, there is no public comment from Las Vegas. Agenda item number 11, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move for adjournment.
I second.
Secretary of State has moved to adjourn. The Attorney General has seconded the motion. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. This meeting's adjourned. I think we set a record for expediency. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.